spend with you. So here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy.
Last week we talked about the prayer of Daniel. We talked about George Washington's last words as he stepped down from being president. And today I want us to go into the book of Habakkuk. And I want us to look at some thoughts there, because they're going to tie, and you're going to see how they're going to connect one to another. And notice the absolute concern on the part of Habakkuk as he goes to God, and God reveals through him various things. So it's a very short book, 3 chapters, but it is contained with, so much that's there. And if you look at chapter 1, verse 1, you see that he's got the introduction. The oracle or the burden is what he identifies. Now, the word Habakkuk means to embrace. And he speaks as one who has taken his nation to his heart. I appreciated Randy's prayer this morning, because Randy seems to have, in essence, taken the nation and its concern to his heart, praying on behalf of our civic leaders, our governmental leaders, praying on behalf of the nation that we'd get back on track. Yesterday was a grim reminder of what's happened in our nation over the years. Even as the news came across, I thought back to RFK being shot and assassinated here. I thought of Reagan being hustled into the limousine and being hauled away after he was shot. John Kennedy in November of '63. I was in Spanish class when the news came across that he was shot. So we have a history. It's not a very good history in that regards. But you look back at the nation of Judah, you look at the nation of Israel, and you realize their history was equally not all that palatable. So Habakkuk is like one, trying to comfort a child that's been upset. Dennis the Menace this morning, he was going through, the father was putting him to bed. And Dennis goes, turn on the hall light. Turn on my night light. Leave the door open. And so the father went and told the mother, whatever he was watching tonight on streaming, make sure it's blocked in the future. Those things indelibly get etched in our mind. And so, as Habakkuk writes, he writes prior to Daniel and to Jeremiah. He's kind of a contemporary with Zephaniah and Nahum. Some even say that he writes during the time of Josiah and the realization that following Josiah's kingship, that the nation is going to be torn asunder. Whenever he writes, it is a dire time. And he has a threefold message that he wants to communicate: the burden, the vision, and the prayer. The burden starts out very powerfully. If you look in at verses 1 down through chapter 2 and verse 1, that's the vision, the burden, the burden that he's carrying. The vision is seen in chapter 2, the prayer, chapter 3. And he takes the complaint of the people directly to God. He pleads the case of the people before God as like one who was an attorney, pleading the case openly, powerfully. He demonstrates exactly what the people are dealing with and his concerns. So let's begin to look at it. The burden he's carrying. He longs for an answer. Well, let's read his words. Verse 2 of chapter 1. How long, O Lord, will I call for help? That's been something that refrain has been heard throughout the Bible. How long, O Lord, holy and true? You think of those that cry out in the book of Revelation. They cry out, how long before you avenge us? And you go back into the other prophets. How long, O Lord? We look at us today. Many cry out, how long, O Lord? How long? Some say we want to reach the pinnacle that we once enjoyed. But maybe we haven't reached the pinnacle yet. And so we cry out to God. It's something we should do. Something every nation should do. How long, O Lord, holy and true? But look further. And thou wilt not hear. I cry out to thee, violence, yet thou dost not save. Why does that make me see iniquity? Cause me to look on wickedness. Yes, destruction and violence are before me. Strife exists. Contention arises. Therefore, the law is ignored. Justice is never upheld. For the wicked surround the righteous. Therefore, justice comes out perverted. Sound like us? It echoes exactly what we face. He says, I wonder, God, if you're still in control. I really begin to wonder if you are. And if you are, how can you possibly turn an eye to what's going on? To all the wickedness, all the violence. We know that there are people leaving California in droves. Excuse me for a second. We know they're leaving California in droves. Why? They claim that it's because of taxation, because of wickedness, violence, all sorts of different reasons. But we're leaving. We're going. Now, that's been a call throughout time for people. How long? Is God really in control? So we can understand where Habakkuk is coming from. And we do likewise. We greatly lament over the conditions. People now are not going out at night. People are saying, well, I'm going to do my shopping from home. I was talking to a shopper, one of the ones that are paid. I hate that. I don't. Anyways, I was talking to one of those people that fill the carts for others to have them either delivered to their home or they pick up at the store. And he said that the business is increasing. More and more people are not coming out. Why? Well, everything's behind lock and key. Everything, you can't get to it. I'm afraid. I'm afraid. Is that the type of community we want to live? It's not just now. It was back in the days of Habakkuk. He said, I'm concerned. I'm concerned. So God, are you really in charge? Are you indifferent? But look a little bit closer. Drop down to about verse 5. Because now God's going to respond to it. He said, I know you're carrying a load. But God responds. And basically, God said, I'm not indifferent. Well, let's read it. Look among the nations, observe, be astonished, wonder. because I'm doing something in your days you would not believe if you were told. For behold, I'm raising up the Chaldeans. Now, God then begins to articulate down through about verse 11. He begins to point out exactly what is transpiring. And he's doing something that's really going to be hard for Judah to understand, because he's going to raise up other nations that are going to carry out judgment upon that nation. Primarily, he said the Chaldeans, but really what he has reference to, he's using that as symbolic. He has reference to the Babylonians. And I'm going to use the Babylonians to execute the judgment of mine. And he knows the arrogance of the Babylonians. He knows the ruthless nature of that people and how devastating it's going to be for Judah. They're going to be carried away for 70 years in captivity. It's not going to be pleasant. You read the book of Daniel, because Daniel chronicles basically what happened when Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians came in, carried him away. Daniel was but a young man. But Daniel, when he was carried away, was mindful of something. Mindful of his need to stay in league with the God of heaven. And so when Daniel articulates his prayer, we have sinned. Daniel was but a young man when carried away. Daniel said, I am part of this nation. Habakkuk writes before Daniel. And God said, it's going to happen. And you're going to wonder why. But it needs to happen. There needs to be a judgment, needs to be carried out. It's all that he's saying. Look at verse 12 of Habakkuk. Why? Why? Why does this have to happen? So look at verse 12 beginning. Art thou not from everlasting, O Lord, my God, my Holy One? We will not die. Thou, O Lord, hast appointed them to judge, and thou, O Rock, hast established them to correct. Thine eyes are too pure to approve evil, and thou canst look on wickedness with favor. Why dost thou look with favor on those who deal treacherously? Why art thou silent and wicked, when the wicked, swallow up those more righteous than they? Why hast thou made men like the fish of the sea, like creeping things without a ruler over them? The Chaldeans, and again, that's an additive type thing, Babylonians, bring all of them up with a hook, drag them away with their net, gather them together in their fishing net. Therefore, they rejoice and are glad. Therefore, they offer a sacrifice to their net, burn incense to their fishing net. But though these things, their catch is large, their food is plentiful, will they therefore empty their net, continually slay nations without sparing? These people are ruthless. It's exactly what he's saying. God, how can you let this happen? How? Why? And here's the bottom line. If you flip over to Isaiah, the 55th chapter, and verse 8 and verse 9, you find the answer. God said, for my ways are above your ways. And I'm just compartmentalizing what's being said there. Isaiah 55, verses 8 and 9. We may not always understand why God does the things that he does, or why God allows the rulers that he allows. But God has a reason, and his ways are clearly above our ways. And like we talked about last week, we sit back and we lament where we are. Yes, we have sinned. We have gotten off track as a nation. We sit back and we go, man, out of 300 and nearly 40 million people, we're left with these two individuals that are severely flawed to be the candidates for the highest office in the land. God, I don't understand. Lord, help me to understand. Why? How? And I'm not touting one individual over another. I'm not. What happened yesterday was terrible. And I'm glad that the two men spoke. But I'm of the mind of Habakkuk. How? Why? I don't want to see it. I want to see us back to where we should be. And that's what Habakkuk is asking. And asking really, why, God, you're indifferent to what's going on in the world. What's happening in Gaza? What's happening in the Ukraine? What's happening in China? And on and on and on. God, why are you indifferent? And God said, I'm not indifferent. I'm truly not indifferent. Second chapter. Habakkuk has a vision. In the second chapter, in the first 4 verses, God affirms directly, I am still in control. Don't ever forget that I am in control. Habakkuk is waiting kind of for an answer, and when the answer comes, God firmly states, I'm still in control, and I will always be in control. I have all authority, all power, all dominion. And he encourages Habakkuk to live by faith. I want you to be a man of faith. I want you to have complete, absolute trust in me. It's God speaking. So you look at those first 4 verses, and that's exactly what he's saying. He answered. Record this down in verse 2 and inscribe it on tablets. And continue on reading. And that's what God's saying. I am in control. And see what we have a problem with is we have a problem always of worried about the other guy. What's going to happen to the other guy? What punishment is going to be accorded to him? I want you to hold on to that thought for a few seconds, maybe more than a few seconds. Because as you go through and look at the vision here in chapter 2, you see that verses 5 through 8, that there's an issuance of woe to the proud, to those possessed with lust of conquest and plunder. In other words, I know Babylon's going to carry out my judgment against the nation. It's going to come back. They're going to get theirs. Fear not. Verse 9 down through 11. Woe to those who build an empire based on godlessness. Again, they will get their empire. And as I was reading this and kind of laying it out, I began thinking of when I was a kid and got called into the principal's office along with a couple other guys. And they were dismissed. And I go, whoa, 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 whoa. The principal goes, what do you mean, whoa, whoa, whoa? I know I'm going to get punished, but what about them? What about them? And that's basically what's going on here. I know we're getting punished as a nation, Habakkuk is saying. I know that. I know that's what's going to be carried out. But what about these godless people? What about them? Are they going to get off just free and clear? And God said, don't worry about them. Remember in Romans 12th chapter, toward the end, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. That's what he's talking about. But look a little bit further as it goes on. Woe to those who are cruel, and woe to those given to idolatry. So while God is definitely visiting judgment upon those that were his people that had wandered astray, in this second chapter of Habakkuk, he says, fear not, fear not. So the lesson to be learned, 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 10. Don't worry about the other guy. You got enough to worry about yourself. Look to yourself. Judgment's going to fall on everyone. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 10. All of us are going to have to stand before the judgment seat of God. So, something else to learn. God told us through Habakkuk, he told us to trust God. Trust God. Humble yourself and learn. So go over to the 23rd chapter of the book of Luke. And in that 23rd chapter, drop down at verse 46. Luke 23, verse 46. And Jesus crying out with a loud voice, Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit. And having said this, he breathed his last. What we find there is total commitment, total surrender by Christ. Father, in thy hands I commit my spirit. Same thing is found back in basically Psalms 31, verse 5. But it comes back to us. God's telling through this vision of Habakkuk, I want you to humble yourself. I want you to learn what's happening to the nation, and I want you to understand what's going to happen to your oppressors. But what I want you to do is humble yourself. I want you to firmly commit yourself. We need to have that mindset of true humility, willing to devote ourselves to God and not worrying about what's going to happen to the others. Am I doing what I need to do? Am I doing what is right in the sight of God? How righteous am I? And I can't use my alleged righteousness to beat anyone over the head with it. Because the minute I do that, I've lost it. So Habakkuk has this vision. He has the burden. He has the vision. And the vision basically is let go. Let go. Let God be in control of your life. This book transcends time. It comes down to us today. We embrace the same attitudes wrongly. We need to embrace the positive attitudes rightly. So many times we look at these little books in the Old Testament and go, there's no application. I beg to differ. It is as if somebody's sitting at our dinner table and hearing our conversations. And that someone is God. And he's telling us basically, when are you going to let go and let me be in control of your life. Allow me, through my word, to direct you, to teach you, and you to embrace it, you to accept it, you to apply it. Well, look at what happens. Habakkuk then goes in the 3rd chapter in prayer. And he appeals mightily. He appeals for mercy. And isn't that what we appeal for more often than not as we go to God in prayer? We want mercy. We want grace. And that's exactly what Habakkuk starts into in that 3rd chapter. Lord, I have heard the report about thee, and I fear. O Lord, revive thy work in the midst of the years. In the midst of the years, make it known. In wrath, remember mercy. Unmerited favor. That's what I long for, Father. That's what I lay before you. Be merciful. Please, be merciful. And then he goes on and talks about, God, I want to thank you. For in the past, you showed us great deliverance. You provided for us amply. And I know what you've said, and I know you promise us deliverance from the oppression that's going to come. And so I ask you to be merciful. Now, in the 2nd chapter of the book of Philippians, in verses 25 down through about verse 30, Paul talks about answered prayers. And, sometimes we fail to remember that God does answer our prayers. He answers them positively and assertively. We have, I can think of 2 powerful examples of answered prayers sitting right here in the auditorium. 2. And that's just off the top of my head. Lowell Bohannon, Karen Miller. Both were faced with dire, dire circumstances. We had questions whether they were going to survive, whether they were ever going to be able to talk again, think again, reason again. All from a mosquito bite. And we prayed on behalf of them. And the doctors, we prayed for the doctors. And thanks be to God and praise be to God, they're here. Both of them. And we're the better for it. And it took them a long time. And they probably thought, man, I'm never going to get better. But here they are. With us. Smiling, singing. Forgetting their canes in the parking lot. That's all good, Lowell. Deanna reminded me of that yesterday. But it's all good. It's all good. So do we think that thank God for their recovery? I would hope so. I would hope so. It's great to see Julianne. We prayed on her behalf, on behalf of others who we thought would never, ever make it. So we need to be praying for our nation. We need to be praying for the congregation. We need to be praying for each and every one. Did you think about praying for Dean Kirk? Did you think about praying for John Adams and others? God has delivered us. God has answered so many prayers. And Habakkuk then goes on to talk about in his prayer. He said, I recognize the need for discipline. Well, that's Hebrews, the 12th chapter. That God disciplines those whom he loves. And we sometimes face discipline. We sometimes do. It is so reminiscent of what Daniel would pray. And it is reminiscent of what we find repeated throughout the New Testament. It is reminiscent of our thoughts today, of our thoughts yesterday, and 5 years ago, and 10 years ago, and going forward. Our thoughts are shared. Why? Because Solomon said, there is nothing new under the sun. One generation comes and another leaves. It is up to the young people to drive old people crazy. It's what you got to do. Just don't do it too much. And Audra, my heart goes out to you. But kids drive you crazy. And even they drive you crazy when they're in their 40s and 50s. They still drive you crazy. And I know we drive God crazy. And I use that metaphorically. We try him. But we ought not to. We ought not to. So Habakkuk shares his fears. Do you share your fears with God? Lord, this is what I'm afraid of. This is my concerns. I'm bearing it all before you. I'm bearing it all. See, what we can learn by looking at Habakkuk. 3 chapters. 3 chapters. God's going to judge the wicked. He's going to. They're not going to get away with what they think they're going to get away with. Evil is self-destructive. And the righteous must be patient. Must be patient. That's what we saw back in the book of Job. And you've got to trust God. Realize that God's ways are well above our ways. I don't know why God does things he does. I don't. But God has a pattern. God has a plan. I was watching on, was it Biography or maybe it was on PBS? Regardless, I was watching a multi-part series on Benjamin Franklin. And it was rather fascinating to watch the progression and the mellowing of this man. And he became more and more a believer in God as time went on. And he was the elder statesman above Jefferson and all the others. He was well advanced in age. Continental Congress, he went. He was 15 to 20 years senior over all the other delegates. But he was grown and had grown. Had flaws? Oh, absolutely. But he had grown. Did he come up with a complete trust in God? Not that I know. But he was working to that end. We need to develop that trust in God. And we need to know that sometimes in life, we're going to go through a period of time where divine discipline is upon us. How it works, I don't know. I don't know. But we know we're disciplined. We know that discipline, in part, comes from his word. Powerfully comes from his word. Go with me, if you would, into the book of Romans. And Romans, we're going to go into the 12th chapter. And We're going to drop down about verse 7. If service in his serving, or he who teaches in his teaching, he exhorts in his exhortation, he who gives with liberality, he who leads with diligence, he who shows mercy with cheerfulness. Let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Give preference to one another in honor. Not lagging behind in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, persevering in tribulation, devoted to prayer. Are we characterized by those things? Because that is what God would have us and want us to do. Embrace it. Be in service to one another. Realize that in life, there are going to be evil people. In life, there's going to be discipline. And in life, we're going to have the opportunity to pray on behalf of one another. We're going to have the opportunity to realize God answers prayers and to thank God for answered prayers. The book of Habakkuk is a simple book, powerful book, and one we can learn greatly from. The lesson is yours this morning. And I trust you found something to take away from it. We are, this year, we're in a period of time where emotions can run hot, where anger can flash because of political leanings. Don't let it come between us. We need to hold on to what is true and realize the power of the gospel of Christ. It welded us together. It holds us together. And thanks be to God for his love that binds us together. Habakkuk's prayer and the lessons learned. If there's anyone here that might be subject to the invitation, while we didn't preach what would be constituted a gospel sermon, yet if you realize that you are in a sin, you need to have that sin remitted. The only way to do that is by doing what Peter said on the day of Pentecost, to repent and be baptized for the remission of your sins. If you're subject to that invitation, we would invite you to come while we stand and sing the song selected.